Coming up on Choppers Politics.
Boris knows how unpopular he is with the Scottish voters. He knows he's unpopular and he is trying desperately to remedy that. Now, how he's going to do it, I have no idea, because it's a big ask.
I'm Christopher Hope, the Telegraph chief political correspondent. And if you haven't guessed by episode number 184 of my podcast, my pals call me Chopper. It's the end of term. The school bell has rung and MPs are packing their bags and heading back to their constituencies. Parliament is out for the summer. But it's certainly not a case of putting up its feet just yet. With the government set to launch its anti-obesity strategy next week, on today's episode I caught up with Gideon, Tory MP for Stoke-on-Trent Central and member of the All-Party Group on Obesity, to ask why it's up to the government and not, us, to encourage Britons to eat more greens. And in the week that the Intelligence and Security Committee published its Russia report into Britain's spies' views of hostile threats against the UK, Kevan Jones, a Labour MP and long-serving member of that committee, will be here telling us how we can all sleep at night. But first, Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, chose to mark the first anniversary of his premiership by heading to Scotland, donning his kilt, perhaps concerned about surging support for the nationalist government led by Nicola Sturgeon ahead of next May's Scottish elections. And with me to discuss why Mr Johnson appears to be not quite cutting the mustard north of the border is the Telegraph's Scotland commentator, Alan Cochrane. Alan Cochrane, the Telegraph's regular commentator on Scottish politics, joins me now for the podcast. Alan, good morning.
Morning, Chris.
Alan Cochrane, why is Boris Johnson not landing his punches north of the border?
It's a funny one, this, because there is a feeling that it's a sort of old Etonian, posh guy attitude in Scotland. But I mean, the Scots managed to cope with David Cameron, and in the olden days, people hunting, shooting and fishing prime ministers like Harold Macmillan were very well regarded in Scotland, if you'll remember. So there's something about Boris, his sort of brashness, his sort of schoolboy humorous stuff that grates with the Scots. And of course, if you add the other B to Boris, in other words, Brexit, it makes quite a devastating double for Scots to cope with, because, as you know, the Scots voted quite significantly in favour of staying in Europe. And now we've got a Boris who's led the campaign for Brexit as the Prime Minister. So you can see from the election results in December, where the Tories lost half their seats, that it's a big ask for Boris to come up here and win the hearts of the jocks.
Yeah. There's history with Boris Johnson and the Tories, isn't there, in Scotland? There was this Operation Arse operation in 2019. What was Operation Arse, Alan?
I assume you're referring, we never use language like that in Scotland, as you know, Chris. Well, it was basically anybody you would do but Boris. It's an undercover operation, but not very much undercover, organised by David Mundell, then the Scottish Secretary, to stop Boris becoming the leader. And Boris, by the way, here's an exclusive for you. Boris knows how unpopular he is. And after the election in December, he did ring Lord McInnes, who's the chief strategist in Scotland, and said to him, look, I'll come up to Scotland as soon as the election fever has died down. And if necessary, I'll come up wearing a bag over my head so no one knows it's me. I'm determined to get up to Scotland and make my mark with the Scottish voters. He knows he's unpopular and he is trying desperately to remedy that. Now, how he's going to do it, I have no idea, because it's a big ask. What David Cameron did was, he knew that he had a problem, the old Etonian problem as well. But what he did was he came up to Scotland regularly, often, and met not just voters, although he did a lot of kissing babies and pressing the flesh with Scottish Tories. But what he did do is he met lots of opinion formers, and he met them regularly. He'd meet editors, columnists, important people like me and you, and made his mark very quickly, and it worked. Now, Boris, well, you know Boris is better than I do. Boris is good fun at a social occasion. I think that might well work for him if he cares to do it, but he's got to get cracking and do it. I don't know anybody other than me who knows him in Scotland. he needs to meet the editors, he needs to meet the commentators, he needs to meet the nationalist-leaning newspapers regularly. I'm sure we're going to get on to Nicola Sturgeon shortly, but I mean, she is extremely popular with not just the voters, but also with lots of the editors.
The problem he's got is that Sturgeon has had a very good virus. She's done the health bit very well, but then, of course, that's her job. Her job is to do the health bit very well. Now, isn't it the case that if the Tories or the government chose to have an advertising campaign, like they're saying today, 900,000 Scots supported through the furlough, and emphasise the power, the strength of the union, while also allowing for strong devolved work by Nicola Sturgeon and the rest, that might work. I mean, maybe a big ad campaign for the union is what they want.
I think something of that ilk is necessary, whether it's an ad campaign or whether it's just got to be done by word of mouth, I'm not sure. But you're absolutely right. I mean, Nicola Sturgeon has had a good campaign. She's been up and down and round the houses in very mixed messages a hell of a lot of time, but that hasn't got through to most of the general public. It's infuriated the business community because basically Nicola's priority has been to suppress, as she would put it, the virus, and to some extent, and let the economy go hang. Because it's not just cynics like me who would say it, but there is a view that, of course, she could spend her whole time fighting the virus because she could depend upon the Chancellor to ante up the money if things were going wrong for Scottish business, because no UK government would have allowed the Scottish economy to crash completely, and his money, the UK taxpayers' money, sent out by the Chancellor and Boris, has made a phenomenal difference in Scotland.
Yeah.
I do think a balance sheet, like you're describing, published shortly, like maybe in September, showing the profit and loss figures for what's come north from the Treasury coffers to support the Scottish economy and allowing Nicola to concentrate on the health stuff. That would be a wonderful bit of paper if somebody could draw it up.
Well, it takes a bit of imagination, number 10, but all we hear about are these Barnett consequentials, which should mean nothing to anybody, but it means that the money going north, the money under a big formula called a Barnett formula going north, is the Barnett consequentials, and that money is net going north and supporting the Scottish economy. Do you think that she's practicing socialism in the north in a much more the way that the Scottish approach appears to be that we don't really trust the people at all, in the same way that the Tory government appears to be saying, as best it can, that we trust you to get this right. And it's more kind of on the population than it is in Scotland, where they're pretty micromanaging a lot of everyone's life.
There's a hell of a lot in it. Nicola Sturgeon is, and this is, I'm not being unkind here, very much more of a control freak than is Boris, and she has kept a very firm grip on all aspects of the fight against COVID, and her advisors are basically advising her much the same as they're advising Boris, but she's decided on a completely different tactic to suppress kill COVID, while Boris is allowing the economy he's taking a chance, he knows he's taking a chance, by allowing the economy to free up and allow businesses and pubs and hotels and all sorts of things to open again, while she's kept a very, very firm grip on the whole thing, so that she remains in charge. Whereas Boris, I think you're right, says, well, look, let's trust the people a bit more and free the economy quicker. You can see when every time Nicola Sturgeon, we use first names up here, it's very, very annoying for people. Every time she says something like, okay, you can go to the pub tonight, it's almost as if she's saying, don't you bloody dare go to the pub and talk to somebody. Don't you dare go and speak to your granny after all this time. It's almost, she's threatening us the whole time, even at the same time as allowing some form of freedom. It's a remarkable tactic to use and completely different from that exercise by Boris down south. I mean, and there's very, very, very little difference. Okay, The biggest problem, I think, after this, when the inquests are done and the inquiries are done, is going to be the care home mortality, the absolute charnel houses that the whole of the UK has turned old people's homes into. I mean, there's very little difference. I'm stand to be corrected on this, between the death rate in English care homes and Scottish care homes. They are the worst bit of this COVID outbreak that we should be thoroughly ashamed of, all of us, for allowing this to happen.
And there will be a public inquiry. Whether that happens in time for the election next year, Alan Cochrane, I doubt it. That, of course, is the big moment, isn't it? The Scottish elections. Now, if Boris Johnson loses Scotland, he knows he's toast. Is that why he's in Scotland today, Thursday? Because his 1-year anniversary of being Prime Minister is tomorrow, Friday?
Well, I would guess so. I mean, you know as well as I do that politicians love anniversaries, especially the ones that they want to remember. But like Boris has, it's going to be a hell of a fight next year to hold on to some sort of unionist grip. The Tories are in trouble. The biggest problem in Scotland, though, is not the Tories. The biggest problem is the Labour vote has gone straight over to the Nationalists. I've been talking to very nice, very able Scottish Labour politicians. When they have these focus groups, they discover to their horror that Labour supporters are not interested in fighting the Nationalists. They still want to fight the Tories, even though there's hardly any Tories left in Scotland. It's bizarre. And what we need, as well as to bolster the Tory vote, is to get that bloody Labour vote up again. And that's got to be somebody like Gordon Brown's job. Gordon has a following still among Scottish.
You can't bring back the boy band from the 1990s. I mean, these guys have moved on, though.
Well, you're right, but there's still an affection for Gordon Brown amongst older Labour voters. But Gordon, again, he's the same. He doesn't fight the Nationalists. You look back at his speeches over the last year or so. All he does is attack the Tories. Well, we know that he doesn't like Tories. But if we're going to save the Union, he's got to attack the Nationalists. There are a couple of good. Ian Murray, who's a first-class shadow Scottish secretary, but he needs to be up here fighting the Nationalists, not in Westminster. And by the way, when I say up here, I'm currently in the south of France, as you know. He's got to spend more time here. He's got to talk to the opinion formers and prove to them that he's not a bumbling ogre, which is still the view of many. Because and there's so many U-turns, Chris, that you guys are reporting in the Telegraph.
Well, Alan Cochrane, we'll find out soon enough. Thank you for joining us from your chateau in the south of France. Alan Cochrane. Right, stick around. In just a moment, we'll be working out why a Tory government thinks it's its job to get us to eat more healthily. Right after this.
Sick of gotcha political coverage?
Tired of the endlessly cynical news cycle?
Secretly think that most journalists are on another planet?
Do we have the show for you? Join us on Planet Normal, a Telegraph podcast that speaks your language.
Bringing you news and views from beyond the bubble with columnists Alison Pearson.
That's me, and Liam Halligan.
That's me.
I finally learnt what a podcast is and even how you can subscribe to one. It's actually very simple. Search Planet Normal on your podcast app or click on the link in the show notes from this episode.
You could say one small step for me and Alison, but one giant leap for normal people everywhere. Bit much?
Yeah, when aren't you too much?
And we're back. Have you ever heard of the Lockdown 10? Well, if you haven't, that means you've escaped the £10 that many of us have put on during the pandemic, locked in our homes, just a hop, skip and a jump from the biscuit tin. No wonder that Boris Johnson says he's worried that we are fatter in Britain than virtually all other nations in Europe, apart from, well, the Maltese, apparently. Well, rather than allowing you to sort the problem out for yourself, next week the PM will be setting out his plans to make us slimmer in his long-awaited anti-obesity strategy. With me to discuss those plans is Gideon, Tory MP for Stoke-on-Trent Central and a member of the All-Party Group on Obesity. Joe, good morning.
Good morning.
Joe, why are we all so fat?
Well, we're fat because we eat highly processed foods with too much sugar, too much salt, too much of the bad fats, and don't exercise enough, maybe.
So it's a question of personal choices, is it then, rather than the government's problem?
So, no, I don't think it's a question of personal choice. I think that the individual has some responsibility, but ultimately it's a partnership of what's available. The choices that we make are basically due to the opportunities we have to make those choices. And in places like Stoke-on-Trent, if you don't have a car, if you can't get to a large supermarket, you go to your local corner shop, you buy food that's affordable and filling, and you know that will be eaten. And those tend to be then the less healthy foods.
Is that not the answer, though? Surely these corner shops who work on very tight margins are merely offering up what people want to eat. If they want to eat food that's from tins or processed, then they'll get that. Is that not the market working properly?
Well, that's why I think we need to have a much more fundamental approach to the whole food system, if you like. So, we all know, if we look at what's happened during the pandemic, yes, we all have an individual responsibility, but the health of the nation is a shared responsibility. So we need to have the opportunity to have healthier foods cheaper. We need to have more nutritious foods. We need to have, fewer multi-packs of chocolates and crisps and things sold, but that's not just the responsibility of the little corner shop. That's the responsibility of the food producers, the system, the marketeers. It's a whole system change that we need.
We're expecting the obesity strategy out next week from the government. Why do you think a Tory government, is telling people how to eat?
The pandemic effectively has changed the way government has had to operate. The pressure on the NHS, and I think this presents a real opportunity for us to look at things that absolutely matter to the nation now. That health has become a real priority across the nation, and also I think people recognise that, if you like, that we're in it together. So I think that's the government's role to pull everybody together.
Would you be happy with maybe more taxes on sugary items like milkshakes?
There are lots of options. More taxes is one. Reformulation. I mean, I think it's about working with business rather than taxing things. In many other areas, ethical businesses and trading in things that are good for the environment and good for the community in general actually have a premium. And I think that we need to change our way of thinking in this country, that we need to demand more healthy foods as a cheaper option rather than having to, if we can't afford them, having to settle for second best. I mean, out of 19 countries, European countries, the UK came bottom or top, however you look at it, in terms of how much highly processed foods we have. The offer that people have to choose from, especially, as I say, when they live in poorer areas and they have less accessibility. If you want to feed a family and fill them up and be sure that they'll eat what you're going to give them, you'll tend to go for the foods that kind of taste good but aren't very good for you in terms of health.
But Joe Gideon, I just wonder why a Tory government is doing this. If people want to buy foods that aren't good for them, is it not a question of trying to go upstream and teach them how to make better, healthier food more cheaply than food you can buy?
Well, in Stoke-on-Trent, the Hardship Commission did a survey last year and asking people how they felt about food. And they talked about having poor general health and ageing faster due to food poverty and poor nutrition. And they mentioned life skills such as healthy eating, cooking knowledge. So yes, I mean, I do think there's a role for back in our schools, learning more about nutrition and healthy eating and how to prepare healthy food. But I don't think ultimately that's going to solve the problem. If you push it back onto the individual, if you say it's your fault that you're fat, that's a really negative message. And I think that just as we've had a sort of shared responsibility during COVID to say we all want to help each other to conquer this, to keep the NHS safe, so too, obesity and the health of the nation is a collective responsibility. And I think that's a really important message to go out.
Well, what's your experience of dieting?
Well, I confess I'm a bit of a chocoholic, so I certainly need to live by my own mantra. But so I know it's not easy. I know that the things that taste good, and during lockdown, people comfort eat because they have to deal with things like mental health and stress, and so that's why I say it's really not fair to say you should eat the right things and then you'll be fine and it's your individual choice. We've got to make it easier for people. I mean, for instance, we need to move to a more plant-based diet. That's something that we know from an environmental point of view. And in order to do that, we have to get our food manufacturers. Maybe we incentivise farmers to grow different things, or there are so many different options. The tax on sugary things is one, restricting promotions, labelling calorie content on products. But I think we've got a real opportunity at this moment in time to look for more innovative solutions as to how we change what we offer the nation in terms of food.
Do you think we should ban programmes like Bake Off, which shamelessly demonstrate how nice sugar is?
So I think what we should do is, I don't think we want to demonise sugar completely. I think what we need to do is to have lots more shows where you show how you can cook really nutritious, really tasty food that is also healthy. So that would be a more conservative way of moving people's eating patterns.
How do you think this, if I can say, nanny state message will go down in the red wall seats the Tories won in 2019 election, notably your own seat, Stoke-on-Trent Central?
Well, I don't accept it's a nanny state message. I think people here want to have equality of opportunity. Levelling up is all about equality of opportunity. And if you have health inequalities, you don't have that opportunity. Because if you're unwell, unhealthy, kids, the educational attainment levels here are much lower, and the direct correlation between obesity, poor nutrition, malnutrition and attainment, are very evident. So I think that if people recognise that what we're trying to do is to help everybody become more healthy, in a way that is, as I say, it's a collaborative way. So Stoke will get it. Stoke absolutely will get it because we have an incredibly strong community. And if I can tell you, during lockdown, the Hub Foundation delivered 100,000 meals across Stoke-on-Trent. Over 100,000 now. And these were cooked meals prepared, linked to Port Vale Football Club. So healthy prepared foods. If somebody delivers you a healthy prepared meal, you're not going to say, I'm not going to eat it because it doesn't have enough sugar in. So it's that thing of people recognise and want to eat good food, but we have to make it accessible, affordable, and I don't think people will say I really don't want to eat healthy food. I really don't believe that's a message that anybody feels is valid.
And Joe Gideon, we're coming out on Friday this week on the 1-year anniversary of Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister. Marks out of 10, please. Honest marks out of 10.
Well, I've got to say 10 out of 10, haven't I?
Oh, for goodness sake. Joe Gideon, Tory MP for Stoke-on-Trent Central and a member of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Obesity. Thank you so much for joining us on Jobbers Politics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, are you sleeping comfortably? I hope so, because this week we heard plenty to worry us about the threats facing the UK from hostile states in the heavily redacted Russia report from Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee. For example, did you know that the UK has no idea how many Russian agents are actually in Britain, and indeed, to try and prosecute them, they must be caught red-handed, handing over secrets to a hostile state. No, nor did I. And one MP who knows plenty about the full scale of the threat facing the UK, the full iceberg, if you like, above and below the waterline of what's in public, is Labour MP and member of the ISC, Kevan Jones. Kevan Jones, you see all the secrets that we can't see. You see all the threats that we didn't know about. How do you sleep at night?
Well, I think the professionalism of our security services, they do a fantastic job. And what we have to do is we are the democratic element in the process and to ensure that they have scrutiny. And we're actually quite important part in not only, making sure that they have scrutiny, but also I think gives confidence to the public that the democratic oversight is there.
You're certainly one of the least leaky select committee or committees of MPs and peers that I've known in my decades covering politics.
Well, the problem is the committee wouldn't work if it did, and I think it's that level of trust, I think, between the members of the committee and the agencies and all involved, I think, is the reason why it works.
Your 55-page Russia report was littered with redactions which are marked by 3 asterisks. How extensive was the document that we didn't see? I mean, we saw 55 pages. Was the real one 200 pages long?
No, I mean, the redaction process is there for a reason, and it's an agreed process between the agencies and the committee. And there is some to and fro and what sometimes there are disagreements about what should be redacted and what shouldn't be, but you try to come to a consensus over it. Then there's, with this report, an annex, and the annex was never going to be made public because it includes information which is of very high classification and national intelligence. And so it's a process which does take some time, but it's also the one which is done for the best of reasons to actually protect the sources of the intelligence which we have access to.
You must read a lot about what we think spies are up to. How near to the actual truth is what you read in newspapers?
Well, I think there's the James Bond type image of the security service, and I think and some great conspiracy about what they do and what they're up to. I think overall what they're there to do is obviously protect us in terms of not just by the intelligence they gather, but also putting in place counteraction measures to it. And overall, they are individuals who are very dedicated. And I think also what I think people don't realise, in some cases, they do put themselves in harm's way.
And in terms of how accurate reporting is of what the spies are up to, are we ever near the knuckle?
No, I think the problem is whatever I think I say or they say. I think the romanticism, some of the popular culture would be hard to resist, but also I think some of the various conspiracy theories you hear sometimes that I think would take a security service, several times larger than we have in this country to actually carry out what they're supposed to be doing.
I couldn't get a question in on your press conference on Tuesday, but I was going to ask you, if I had a chance, how many Russian spies there are in Britain.
Well, if I knew that information, I wouldn't tell you.
Now, there has been a report by the Henry Jackson Society saying that there were thousands or a lot of the diaspora in London could be linked to Moscow.
Well, I couldn't possibly comment on that. That's obviously, again, somebody who's obviously got some information from where I don't know.
Do you ever feel a bit weighed down by the responsibility? I mean, have you ever been targeted by foreign powers?
I don't know. I mean, I think the issue around, the role of our security services is obviously of interest to many people, both abroad and in this country. But I think in terms of the committee, it works very well.
And in terms of any action from your long-delayed Russia report, we're looking at a reform of the Official Secrets Act. It's been reviewed once in 1989, in over a century. And also we might get the espionage register. These are all things the government has said it would do in the past. Is there anything else you want to see from it?
Well, no, I think they're one of the main recommendations in the sense that, I think the Official Secrets Act, as you say, is nearly a century old. I think it was designed originally to protect Royal Naval dockyards and people sketching battleships during the First World War.
Gosh.
And, it has been updated, I think, in 1989, but it does need urgent attention. And I think the government now need to move on it. I mean, the Law Commission, I think, met in 2017 and looked at the reforms. And I think we need to see, certainly in this Parliament, that reform brought forward, and the point you make around the espionage. I mean, the other main, I think, concentration in terms of certain protection of the electoral system is the confusion that there is there. And I think what we did recommend is that it should come under security and the Home Office on a policy lead, and then also with MI5 doing the operational lead, because I think at the moment it's too diverse. I think we refer to it as a hot potato that was passed around, and I think it does need some clarity in terms of making sure that we have a robust system to protect our electoral system.
Yeah, so the report says that currently it's down to the Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee to defend our democracy against the Kremlin, which seems a bit unfair.
Well, I think that department, that's perhaps where it is at the moment. It hasn't got the capacity to do that, and I think that's one thing the report clearly says.
Have you ever worried that you might be bugged by foreign powers?
Well, I guess I'm sure people are interested in what we all say, but I think I think the thing I said at the press conference with relationships with foreign powers, including Russia. I mean, the Russian ambassador said at the weekend, we wanted good relationships. I think I would agree with that. I think most people would. I think the problem is, though, at the moment it makes it very difficult when you've got present government in Russia which doesn't follow the international rules of law, which we should all abide by, and that's what the report says.
Part of the authority of the committee in Whitehall and government is that it is seen as being independent. It sits outside politics. Is there any truth in this suggestion that the government tried to hire a political advisor for your committee?
Well, I don't know, but if it was, that would be totally wrong, because we are an independent committee, including having the ability to elect our own chair. So any suggestion that would be completely wrong, and certainly something I would resist.
And just finally, Kevan Jones, I wonder what means you don't sleep at night, because you know a lot more than most of us about the risks facing this country. Well,
I think the confidence is overall we've got a very proactive and professional security services. I had the same issue when I was a minister in the Ministry of Defence. You get to know a lot. Which, does it concern you? Yes, it does. But I think worrying about some of these things doesn't actually improve things. What it is to ensure that we've got the policies in place and support in place and resources to actually counteract those threats too. And that was the main point of this concern about Russia report this week, is improve the situation. Hopefully government will learn from our report and put in place those recommendations which we say will improve our security.
Were you pleased with how the report landed?
Well, I think I think the disappointing thing is how long it took to get out, and I think that led to a lot of I'll say it on the record, silly conspiracy theories about what the report was saying and wasn't going to say, and possibly it disappointed some people and annoyed others. But as I said, we look for evidence, we look at the facts, and I think it was a strong report, and I think there are some clear recommendations in there which could improve our security.
Well, Kevan Jones, thank you so much for coming on Choppers Politics and discussing a big week for your committee and the Russia report. Thank you. And thank you to my guests this week, Alan Cochrane, Joe Gideon, and of course Kevan Jones. Thank you to my brilliant producers, Theo Ludis and Elliot Lampitt. But most importantly of all, thank you to you, dear listener, for listening each week to Choppers Politics. And thanks especially to a listener on Apple Podcasts called 01I0N, who left us a review saying they appreciate the depth and width of guests. Well, my width has certainly expanded during lockdown, but that's for me and my doctor to worry about. But please do try and leave us a review, like 01ION. It really helps other people find this podcast and also boosts us up the podcast charts. If this podcast has left you curious for more top-notch Telegraph journalism, go to telegraph.co.uk/chopper, where you can get 30 days free access to all of our best content free of charge. If you want to get in touch, please email me. The address is chopperspolitics@telegraph.co.uk, or follow us on Twitter @chopperspodcast. And always buy your copy of the Daily Telegraph. It's great value. Until next time, cheerio!